What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another mixing tutorial. Today we're going to be looking at Slaughterhouse by Motionless in White. So it's a fun song with a ton of riffs, huge chorus, and of course we got the good old knocked loose breakdown at the end. Super fun song. So let's hear what we have going on so far in the song. Okay, you guys have probably watched my cover already. You know how it sounded. Let's talk about how we got it to sound that way in the first place. So just to save some time here, the drum mix is pretty much the same as my last mix tutorial I did, the Seether Deliver Me drum mix. Don't be fooled, it was not a rock mix, it was a metal mix in a hard rock song. So all of the tones are the same for that except the kick, and we'll just hop into that first because a few things have changed. So before we look into kind of all the plugins on this and what they're doing, just wanted to say, I'll say it again and again throughout the mix, this is a super high mid focused song, so a lot of what we're going to do with the tones is going to mirror that. So first off, we started out with Decapitator. So let me show you guys, I guess, the just the kick itself right here. So it's a good sample, but immediately we need to brighten it up quite a bit. So I like Decapitator for this because Decapitator does a good job at removing the low end really instead of boosting the high end in a way that feels unnatural. So by turning the knob to bright here, basically removing low end. Okay. Then we go over to Smash and Grab here, which isn't doing a whole lot. It's just basically doing a 1 dB, but it's pulling out the room sound in the kick here. So we'll see that. So yeah, you can hear a little bit, kind of some room reverb coming back into the microphone. So it's boosting that a little bit. We're adding a little bit of high end here with air control and just 30% saturation, which is what I always like to use on Smash and Grab. Next, we're running into Saturn, which does kind of a majority of the shaping for the kick here. So we're driving it at 100% in a kind of region of 750 to 7K here. So that's really giving that nice high mid presence boost that we're looking for. But the actual click of this drum is not very loud in the final mix. So we brought that down to about 6.5 dB. And then we're giving that a little bit of drive too. But as far as the low mids go, we're taking those out almost 12 dB, leaving the kick or the low end of the kick pretty much untouched with only 20% drive. Okay, so let's just hear that on and off. That gets us really close to kind of a final sound where we want to be with the kick here. But just to add a little bit more of that high mid, I'm actually using DF Excite, which is really good for adding high mids here. And yeah, I only have that on 1 because anything more than that just seems like a little bit too much. DF Excite is very powerful and can get out of hand quickly, so. It's just doing a little bit more to get it to sit well. Then we're going in with Pro Q and just taking out a little bit more click on the very high end. But that's it. So that's how we end up with this kick sound. And like I said, all of the other drum tones are in the Seether Deliver Me. So you can go and watch that if you want, but if you're not interested, we can save a little bit of time here in this one. So now that we're done with the drums, let's talk about the bass. As soon as I listened to this, I could hear a ding wall going into a dark glass. That's just what it sounded like to me. So I've kind of used what I think that's going to sound like to make my bass tone here. So let me turn these effects off. We can hear how this bass tone came out of the 2 amps. So yeah, basically I split this into 2, used 2 different settings here. So we have a grit amp and a sub amp. So let's listen to our grit track. That itself is quite low in frequency. It's got a lot of bass in it, but there's also a lot of low bass in the song, so I made another sub track which is even lower. And that one's just really fat, just getting a lot of that low end information in that we might not be able to get with the grit track. Okay, so how did we mix this for the song? It sounds a little bit muffled coming out of the amp, not a ton of high end, but the trick is we also don't want a lot of like presence either, because there's not really a lot of presence in the kick. The kick's really focused around 5K, so we need that in the bass as well. So right off, like I said, this is a dark bass tone, so we kind of did this really big shelf, cutting out a whole lot of the low mids and the low end here, the bass. So yeah, minus 16 dB at 200, and 200 really kind of determines how forward your bass is, especially in the car. It kind of, when there's a lot of 200, it kind of feels like it's out here, and when there's not a lot of 200, it kind of feels like it's sitting underneath you, kind of holding everything up, which is what you want. So in this bass tone, I said there was way too much of that, so we got rid of a lot of it. Some more scoops here in the mids, a little bit of a scoop where the pick attack might be, and then just taking out the low end as I saw fit. We also have Pro MB on here, which is reacting to the kick drum, and so whenever the kick hits, it's going to remove that low end from the bass track so we can hear that kick punch a little bit more. And then just to finish that off, we have power here, and that's really just keeping everything level. So if you're interested to hear how I got these tones in the first place, I have some links in the description to my Patreon where I go into a little bit more detail, well, a lot more detail about how I get these tones in the first place. So that really didn't need to be mixed too much. They sat pretty well with the song. There's not a whole lot of high end in this bass tone, but there also doesn't need to be. So that being said, let's move on to the guitars. Let's hear how these guitars came out of the amp. Same deal with this. On my tutorial on my Patreon, we also go into a lot more detail about how we got that guitar tone. Even though it sounds like a little bit of a mess right now, it works really well for this song. So let's see what we did to control all of the crazy things that are going on here. So to start out, we have Pro MB again, and instead of going with the kick, this one goes with the snare at 400, and that's just because a lot of the body of the snare is coming through at 400, and the guitars like to kind of muffle that. So we just want to make some room for the snare to really pop whenever it hits, so we're just taking out a bit then. Moving on, we're going to BX Refinement, which is doing quite a bit to take it from a really harsh guitar tone to something a lot more usable. So let's turn everything off and just listen to what this one plugin is doing. So that plugin alone is taking a lot of that whistling that we heard. It's taking those frequencies that made this guitar tone really busy and muddy and transforming it into something that is really high mid focused like the rest of the song. And then to compensate for all of that, around 3K we took out, we've boosted 2 dB in the presence just so it doesn't get muffled sounding. Next, we move on to the Cornef Amplified Instrument Processor. And basically, we are scooping this guitar tone to no end. So, right here at 800 and, 1250. We have really scooped that quite hard. So, minus 6 dB there, minus 3 there. That is a lot of low end. So this 1.25K, there we go, I got it. This is making it sound very honky, the amount that's in it now, so it's kind of necessary to take out that much of it. But since we've taken out so much mids, we need to kind of reduce the high end a little bit as well, or else it's going to sound a little bit too harsh. So right here at 6K, we've taken out 3 dB, 2.5. Now, also taking out that many mids is going to make it sound quite thin, so I've gone ahead and boosted 6 dB at 140 to give it some body back. So we're really transforming the sound here. So I'll just toggle all of these on and off, especially this one, and we'll hear what all of those are doing to the tone. You can immediately hear how that 1.25K is really de-honking these guitars, and I'll show you that one more time on a chug part. Scooping that much of that frequency really takes it from kind of an unusable honky guitar tone into a scooped classic metalcore tone. But of course, all these other ones are helping as well. Next, we have a low pass filter, which also helps making it feel not too thin. We're not letting a ton of that presence through, so it feels a little bit more full that way. We also have a little bit of saturation going on with this button in the center. And then we are also taking out a little bit of 2.7K, just 3 dB of that, but it's not really that noticeable, to be quite honest. No stereo width here because we will do that later with a different plugin. More mid scooping going on. This is a extremely scoop tone, so let's just toggle that on and off. So that frequency right there, 400 in the guitars, is kind of where you get the whoomp, whoomp, whoomp sound, especially when you get into the chugs like this. So that fixed that issue. However, it kind of introduced another issue. Now they're feeling a bit too thin. And I don't really want to EQ this any more than I already have because it's quite drastic at this point. So what I've done is I've added the stock saturation filter on Reaper. And this actually does quite a bit to bring the body back to the guitar. So I'll show you that. It's just adding so much more depth to the guitar and really making it stand out, not so thin anymore. So that's really nice. So we're just gonna compress it now. The Joel Wanasek bus glue with the Chug Slayer circuit. That's basically just removing any low end from the palm mutes that we don't want. And then finally, we are using Ozone 9 Imager to really widen the sound, but this actually thickens up the guitars a little bit as well because your mid frequencies are now seemingly wider than the rest of the guitar track. So if you want to download these multi-tracks yourself, you can actually do that on my Patreon as well. So if you do decide to do that, it's kind of a fun thing to do with this track is making these guitars really cut in the high mids but also retain their body in kind of interesting ways. So let's just hear how our bass and guitars are working together. You'll notice that the bass doesn't have much presence, so it's not too distracting, but it's also cutting through in the scooped frequencies that we had to cut out of the guitars. So what we have here is a really kind of mid-focused bass and a really scooped guitar tone. Together they kind of come in to make this interesting match to kind of fill in the voids that the other left. And then, of course, I guess we'll just listen to the bass and the kick really quick. So really what you're looking for is you want the high mids of the bass to match the high mids of your kick, and you want the just kind of lower mids, I guess, to match with the lower mids of your guitar track, and they all kind of mush together to make this big cohesive sound. Okay, so that is everything there. Again, if you want to see how we got these tones in the first place, check the Patreon, and you can get some more in-depth producing tutorials there. Lastly, let's just go on to the post effects section here. Everything's pretty stock here. We have some Joey Sturgis Chaos tones here. Haven't done anything to these. These are just how they are. Really layering these in different ways to come up with some cool effects that add to the sound. I have some feedback here, which I just took this microphone, held it up to a speaker, produced some feedback. Easy enough. And then we have some bass drops in here, pretty self-explanatory. And then we have our synth here. So here is the synth sound for this song. Oh, okay. See, I had the raw tone on there. Let's mute that. Sweet. So I kind of go over how to make kind of the tone, I guess, for this on the producing tutorial as well. But basically, once we have that tone, we're just running it through Misha Mansour Tone Forge on the lead setting through the cabinet, so it kind of sounds like a guitar. A little bit of effects there. This is kind of the star of the show here. The rotary tool here really giving it a different sound, and we can... so if you've ever listen to like Stitch by Wage War, you'll also hear this kind of weird, it makes it sound a little bit creepy. It's really good on leads. It's what gives it that kind of characteristic sound, really transforms it into something usable. L1 to limit that out, and soothe to make sure the resonances don't get too out of hand. Other than that, we can talk about the kind of big moment here in the beginning. So these are just some other synth patches. I go over this in the Patreon tutorial as well. Really just kind of a sawtooth thing there. We don't do any mixing on that. There's really nothing necessary, as there rarely are with synths. And then we just have a bit of a choir sound here going down the center. And that is simply just going through Misha Mansour again, but on the clean channel. It's giving it a little bit of grit, but not too much. And then we're just rolling off some high end there. So that is pretty much it, guys. That is all the important stuff. So there's that. I thought we would just play that one more time. But yeah, that's it. So I hope you guys found this a little bit useful. Again, if you do want to see a little bit more in-depth process of what we did here to get all these tones, check the links below, and hopefully I'll see you guys there. But if not, I will see you next time here on YouTube. So thanks for watching. I'll see you guys later.